Yeah, Alan Quinlan in the house with Dan McDonnell. Not sure you've ever worked together before. Look at the smile on their face.
I think we've been on.
We have, yeah.
You think you have? You're not sure though.
We've
Can't really
passed
remember.
anyway. We've certainly passed. Passed each other in here he's probably hopping up out of
going
the chair,
in and then going out.
Yeah.
I do listen to him a lot though.
What do you make of him?
He's alright.
Yeah, he doesn't
He's
like
only
rugby.
alright.
He's always giving out about rugby.
I don't have the rugby stock. I can't.
How would you sell rugby to him as a sport, Quinny?
I don't know. I have friends, big GA fans down Tipperary that they're gone from the rugby since I retired. You know, they would have kind of let on that they were into the rugby when I was playing and go to an odd match, and then afterwards is kind of they've lost all interest, you know, and they're giving out too much rugby on the back pages. That's what Joe Hayes always says to me, the former Tipperary hurler. Joe's a great character,
legend,
and he's always given out about too much rugby on the back pages. You know, where's the GA? But yeah, Dan is alright, but sure, look, you can convert people. We'll have it in a few weeks, Johnny. We'll have if Ireland stumble or fail to get past the quarterfinals in the World Cup, the anti-rugby brigade will be out. Yeah, well,
okay, so what do you make of the game Saturday then? Because, like, I suppose one thing about rugby over the years has gotten so much more physical, and these warm-up games are really a poison chalice. Like, so you look at the physical, like you want to give fringe players a go. Once you have Crowley gets on it out half. Crowley's grand maybe, but like some of the players that are more up front in terms of the forwards and that, it's dangerous. What do we learn?
The reality here is, I think, and Paul O'Connell said it last week in the press conference, everybody's going to play here. Are they showing their hand too much? No, they're not. I think it was bland at times on Saturday. Very effective. I think when you're leading 21-3 at half time, Italy's probably close to their strongest team. Whereas Ireland's was more or less a completely second string team, bar one or two players, obviously Doris in the forwards and Henshaw maybe in the back line. Otherwise it's a second string team, guys trying to impress. I think the most important part of this run in for Andy Farrell and the players is trying to get minutes under the belt and also avoid injuries. We've seen historically from World Cups that there's always there has been always one or two players who haven't made the cut. You just look at Italy at the weekend. They have two of their best players, Riccioni at tight head. I'm not sure what the update is with him, but Menoncello in the centre was a wonderful player. It looked like his shoulder popped out. Fairly innocuously, his hand was kind of out like
I was watching
like
the
that.
and like, how does this even happen?
Would you believe I saw it many years ago with Mike Prendergast, who's the Munster assistant Munster coach now. We played a pre-season friendly back in the earlier days of 2001, 2 or 3, somewhere around then. I was playing wing forward at the back of a scrum. He kind of went in that position with his hand out like that and kind of barely touched the opposition player, and his shoulder just popped out. So it reminded me of that. So it's very unfortunate. Felix Jones had a bad injury, David Wallace, Tommy O'Donnell, Jordan Murphy, I think, in previous campaigns. So
playing Doris to that extent, and he's obviously amazing, but it's risky.
Yeah, but you need to get minutes under their belt. So will he be? What his involvements will be in the next few weeks, I don't know. But
very
what a player! He's a phenomenal player.
The pace of him.
So many people online, I see wrap him in cotton wool. Is
he? Where is he in our most important players?
He's so effective in everything he does with the ball and without the ball that he has an ability to come up. And to be fair, it's a hallmark of a lot of players in this Irish squad in the last year and a half, 2 years. I keep going back to New Zealand last year because it just keeps coming to my memory the whole time how impressive that second and third test was in New Zealand. Caelan Doris had a quiet first game in Auckland. They were beaten pretty convincingly in the first game. There was a lot in that game that was fixable, that New Zealand got a bit of fortune with some of the tries they scored. And I remember going out of Eden Park that night thinking Caelan Doris was a little bit quiet here. I was a bit disappointed because I'm a massive fan of his. Jesus, he responded in the second and third tests with, and I think Andy Farrell said that the other day. He's the kind of fellow who, if he makes a mistake, He just kind of doesn't let it dwell. He doesn't drop the head.
Yeah.
He nearly intensifies his next action, if you like. So I think if you're looking to a player who's matured and developed so well as a real leader in that team, and how important he is, as you're saying, you know yourself in sport, Johnny, if you make a mistake, that next 5-10 minutes can be really crucial. Some players take longer to kind of get themselves back in a game. I probably experienced that, where I kept running around thinking, God, I've just knocked on the ball, or I've just missed a tackle. He gives you the impression that it's done, I'm going to make a big impact in my next action, and he's a wonderful player.
On that note, what's Stockdale thinking after the missed tackle? It looks bad.
Yeah, and again, I felt really sorry for him.
He played really well.
I think Andy Farrell and everybody wants him to show us what he can do, like he did before in 2018. The energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm to go forward and score tries. I know you can't hang on to the past. Sometimes we do it, and that sometimes happens in sport as well. It's like a striker who scored 30 goals one season, and then he's struggling for a couple of seasons, and he starts moving around clubs, and people believe they can get that back. Jacob Stockdale is still a relatively young, he's still 25, 26 maybe, is he? I'm not sure exactly now, correct me on that one, but he's still a young player. He's still a very, very talented player.
27 now, actually.
27. But it's still relatively young, yeah. And he's, well, it'd be easier to be younger than Keith. He's been around a long time. But you think that's kind of age, though, that you're really kind of mature and you've become... you've a lot of experience as well. So
talk to me about that, though, because if he pushes your man inside, basically, he's kind of half done his job here. So he's really made a hames of the tackle, and he's physically actually superior to him as well.
One of Jacob's kind of
MOs, or whatever you want to say,
I wouldn't say problems or issues, is that little bit of nastiness that you need, that little bit of... Now, James Lowe's missed tackles. You go back 2 years ago over in Cardiff, where he kind of came in off, made some bad reads. But you just think James Lowe's on that left wing. That fended arm that's coming out there, James Lowe, you think is kind of... He's just has that determination that he's nearly breaking your man's arm to stop the fend, when a guy's out trying to hand you off. And we would have trained like that. A lot of it was rugby league, where if you're running at me and I put my hand on your chest... I remember Mike Ford, who came in and trained us with Ireland from rugby league. It was the first time. The action was to hit down on the hand quickly, because if you come with your chest presented, I want to hand the guy off, and it gives you that little bit of momentum to get away. So he obviously went in a little bit high. The handoff, Panny got the handoff on him and scores. And you just think that's one that's just... It was kind of a bit of a... one from the crowd that you go, oh no.
But is it a good thing in the sense that he's...
It's a bad thing for him in the match. No, it's a bad thing for him in the match. He needed to make that tackle. He needed to... he needed to do everything in his power, however you do it. Sometimes, and I say it to players if I'm coaching a young kid, sometimes tackle technique, everything goes out the window. You just jump on a player, you do something, you just make sure you make it, you wrap him some way. But let's not... let's not hang him out to dry here, Jacob Stockdale. Keith Earls missed a tackle as well on Menoncello. So for the any Ulster listeners, Keith Earls missed a tackle too. There were two bad missed tackles. There were two tackles that kind of took a little bit of air out of the performance, the kind of result. I never thought, Johnny, that we would see a performance here of free-flowing rugby. It's about getting minutes under the belt, being pretty effective, pretty basic in the game plan. Ireland are not going to show their hand in the neck, even against England and Samoa. They won't be showing their hand, or Romania, probably not against Tonga. I think there'll be stuff held back here for Scotland and South Africa, the big games.
Well, the biggest thing for me was the out-half situation. I thought Crowley looked very much at home.
He looked assured. He had a few mistakes in him, and Jacob Stockdale had a couple of mistakes that we mentioned, but there was some very positive moments from Jacob Stockdale as well. I think there's a lot more in him in Stockdale, and I hope that he looks back at his game and he gets a chance to do some stuff over in Portugal or in a training camp this week.
Who's number two at out half now?
it's kind of unfair to kind of go suddenly Jack Crowley is gone ahead of Ross Byrne. I think that's the perception there now a little bit.
It didn't harm his prospects.
Ross Byrne needs to play the next game and start against England, which he probably will, and he needs to kind of invigorate himself a small little bit. Given the ends to the season that both out halves had, Crowley finished on a very big high, obviously, in Munster's run to winning the URC, and there was a lot of big moments, but I think up to the semi-final, Jack Crowley was a little bit, the two performances over in South Africa in this round 17 and round 18, he came off in both those games for Ben Healy. So, you know, you just have to be careful in the way we propel these guys. I think Jack Crowley looked very assured. He's still really young. I think he's a confidence player, and I think there was a lot of good moments in the match on Saturday. I think his ceiling, and I've said it before, is higher maybe than Ross Byrne's. Ross Byrne is a very, very good player. So I think it's intriguing the next couple of weeks, and they'll probably go hard at it in training. But of course, Kieran Frawley came in at fly half the other day, and I think that was an
interesting,
exciting prospect as well to see two of them, because Crowley can be a very effective full back, and there's a lot of people talking about, you know, if something happened to Hugo Keenan. Jimmy O'Brien played there at the weekend, and he got a bang in the shoulder, and Jack Crowley goes back and plays there. So
there was that moment as well at the end where they just come to the end of the game, they showed all the subs kind of on the sideline looking on. You're like, jeez, there's some talented players there, like, and Keelan,
when you think of what Andy Farrell has done, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Dan knows this as a rugby nerd. How many players Andy Farrell has capped in the last couple of years? The number is pretty big.
Depth is insane, though.
I wonder what the dynamic is like in a group at this stage, like because I know there's all different battles going on between, like, to be a starting member, but I see Andy Farrell is like naming his final squad later than some of the other coaches. There's like 8-9 lads are going to be cut there, and I'm not sure if it's something that you speak about, but it's probably the unspoken thing that everyone's aware of. There's a call coming at some stage, and some of you are gone. Yeah,
and I remember those calls on a couple of occasions, in particularly in 2003, going to Australia. The excitement of waiting for that call when you're kind of one of those players who's in that, maybe from the bracket from 23 out to that 31, 32, you're one of those 7, 8, 9, 10 players. On two occasions I probably was. 2003 I get in there, it's incredible. Probably 2007 was the most competitive for me, and again, you know, waiting on the fringes. So the one thing that would worry me about this World Cup is it's only from what happened in 2007, and maybe we're all tarnished a little by that, the players who were there. Paul was there, of course, he's coaching now. Is if I asked you to pick the Ireland, either of you to pick the Irish team now and maybe the Irish 23, even if you weren't that into rugby, you'd go very, very close. That happened in 2007 when basically 15 players were kept home from the tour to Argentina. They were literally kept home, and they were kind of wrapped in cotton wool a little bit. And obviously those players knew that they were going to start. They knew that they were going to be picked, and
that's a problem.
And then it was a case for, well, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem. It'll be an excuse if we come unstuck. I think they just have to be mindful of the fact that most of the players know, unless something goes drastically wrong or their form really dips, that they're picked on the team. So to answer your question, I think that's very astute from Andy Farrell. He's actually dragging this out a little bit.
Okay.
This probably something they're mindful of, that most people could pick this Irish starting team now. So because he's waiting till after Samoa, he's probably keeping them all on their best behaviour. In other words, don't drop your standards here, because I haven't my mind fully made up yet, which, you pick the team now. England announced it yesterday, New Zealand did, South Africa are announcing today. it's a couple of weeks out. Fellas could get a little bit. I can ease off a little bit in the fitness now. We can go for a few pints on Tuesday night, or we can sneak out of the hotel, whatever. I'm not saying that it happens, but I think that's probably
It's a good question. Like the out-house situation, like how is Sexton relating to all these other guys who are basically trying to not only get his spot.
I would imagine he's helping him.
Yeah, he probably
is.
He's
helping him.
Like to help Crowley in a situation like Saturday, when there's a lot of pressure on Crowley, because if he flops here, it really undermines him. Like, and this is the problem. I know you're playing Italy, but Crowley has to at least do a 7 out of 10 here. I got to bring you to this Irish Examiner, Brendan O'Brien. If I don't get selected because I just played 12, that's just what it is. McCluskey, talk to me.
It's a difficult position, because if you I think Stuart McCluskey has done very well. Going back to last November, started against South Africa, picked up an injury, came back for Australia. Who's going to be picked here? Is he going to bring 4 centres? That's going to be the intriguing part here. Steve Borthwick has brought an extra forward. I think he's gone 18 forwards, is he? And 15 backs. I'm not sure. I'll have to get the numbers right again. Have a look at it again. But you've got Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Stuart McCluskey, Gary Ringrose. They're kind of the 4 that have been involved in the last number of years. Obviously, McCluskey has come into that mix. Jamie Osborne is the other centre there. So there's 5 centres there. Are they going to bring 3 or 4? I think they're going to bring 3 centres, and those 3 centres are Aki, Henshaw and Gary Ringrose.
It's quite agonising, isn't it?
Because some of the back 3 can probably move into the centre, and it's Keith Earls and Jimmy O'Brien can go in and play outside centre. So Crowley can play at 12 as well. So I think Andy I'd say Mike Catt, obviously this is his call. I think he'll look at that. Whereas if you Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Stuart McCluskey and Gary Ringrose, there's probably only one out of that 4 that can go into the back 3, and that's Gary Ringrose. So it's a difficult one, and it's going to be a tough decision, but it's going to be hard if Stuart McCluskey doesn't make it, because I think he's shown a lot in the last kind of 12 months and what he's done. But it's pretty competitive there, right across the board, and I think he's someone that unfortunately could miss out on it.
It's the first game as well since just after St Patrick's Day, and also the first time Ireland are playing only 3 World Cup warm-up games. They have that Portugal camp, so Farrell is basically saying we don't really need that many games, and
that's because you've got Romania.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, you know what I mean. They can move up the gears in that situation. South Africa won the World Cup last time with a lot of games and going pretty earlier than anyone to Japan. Look, it's about, I've said this about pre-seasons, it's if you go well and things go right, it's the best decisions were made. If we're analysing this, and no matter what happens in the World Cup, Johnny, if Ireland get out of the group, you're playing France and New Zealand. You're kind of flicking a coin. Obviously, if Ireland are bringing brilliant form into a quarter-final, if they're there, because Scotland are going to have a big say in this, you're getting more enthusiastic, and you're kind of really breaking it down then and saying, well, they're playing well, or this is their big strength. I think where they'll be in a better position this time is, I think they'll be quite calm about the challenge, in a sense that they'll have confidence and belief in themselves. But again, it's on the day. France are going to have so much momentum with it being over there. New Zealand, what we've seen of them in the last couple of weeks, it's kind of frightening prospect for
Where are they
if
at?
Possible if Ireland are there.
Briefly now, because you're like, people have this, it's in France, so it's kind of between Ireland and France. We have an edge over New Zealand, but clearly it's not that straightforward.
It's not, no. New Zealand, I think they showed a couple of weeks ago for 20 minutes against South Africa in the Rugby Championship first weekend. It was phenomenal for the first 20-25 minutes of that game. So they can do that. They can bring that pace, that intensity, that quality. They had a bad 2022. culminating in that series loss to Ireland. The Rugby Championship did a couple of bad losses, but they're capable, and I think you can see there's a stamp of Joe Schmidt in this team now. They're far, I think, and I said it after the tour in New Zealand, they kind of rely on this brilliant X factor to rip teams apart. It didn't work in the second and third test for Ireland because Ireland were so stable and connected defensively and stopped them at source, and then they didn't really kind of know what to do. Now they seem to have great timing in their passes. Their breakdown is really effective again. There's Joe Schmidt all over this team, so I think he's obviously had time to bed in there, and you couldn't rule New Zealand out of in any game, but I think even more so now what we've seen in the last couple of weeks from them.
Thanks for your time.
Cheers, lads.